Good evening. Good evening and welcome to the April 23rd meeting of the Minnetonka Park Board. The Park Board generally meets on the first Wednesday of each month. The schedule and agendas can be obtained on the city website. The mission of the Park Board is to proactively advise the City Council on items related to the Minnetonka Park System, leading to an inclusive city with outstanding parks and recreational opportunities within a healthy and biodiverse environment. With that, Leslie, you call roll.
Thank you, Chair Ingraham. Christie. Here. Hanley.
Here.
Lehrman.
Here.
Schultz.
Here.
Samersky.
Here.
Vitale. Here. And Chair Ingraham.
Here. Do I have a approval of the minutes or any comments or on the minutes? On the agenda, excuse me, on the agenda?
Chair, we do have one addendum I want to point out. There is comments that were received on the business item 7A after the packet went out, and so those have been included in your addendum.
Thank you. If no one has questions, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second?
I'll second.
Call.
Christie.
Yes.
Hanley.
Approve.
Lehrman.
Approve.
Schultz.
Approve.
Samersky.
Approve.
Vitale.
Approve.
And Chair Ingraham.
Approve. Moving to the minutes, any questions or comments on those, or do I have a motion to approve them?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Christie.
Approved.
Hanley.
Approve.
Lehrman.
Approve.
Schultz.
Approve.
Samersky.
Approve.
Vitale.
Approve.
And Chair Ingraham.
Approve. We now move to item 5, citizens wishing to discuss items not on the agenda. If anyone wishes to speak on any item that's not on the agenda, please come forward to the microphone, state your name and address of record. And if anybody is, we ask you to limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. No one's doing that. Good. Now we can move on to special matters, and there are none tonight.
We have none.
So we'll go to business items. Number 7, the off-leash dog strategy for Minnetonka Parks. I think that's Matt.
It is. Thank you, Chair. So we do have one item, a business item, regarding the off-leash strategy and guidance document for Minnetonka Parks, and I will turn it over to Mr. Kamka, and he will provide the presentation.
Thank you, Chair Ingraham, Park Board. So, a little bit of background before I get started. The Purgatory Park Master Plan was adopted by the City Council fall last year. Through that process, we identified the need to consider off-leash dogs in Purgatory and other park spaces throughout the city. In November 2024, the City Council adopted new ordinances. These ordinances covered dogs at large in the city, dogs to be on leash, up to a 20-foot retractable leash at large, and specifically in parks in what we're calling designated off-leash areas. This park component of the ordinance goes into effect on May 19th, 2025. The council directed the staff to convene a citizen-based community off-leash dog work group, which we did. The work group comprised of representatives of the community, specific community groups, staff from Public Works, a member of the police were with us. There were 2 park board members on the working group with us and a variety of other residents. These folks were recruited through an application process that ran over the holidays and were eventually appointed by the City Council. We met 3 times, January, February, and March, over long, arduous meetings. We developed what I think are criteria based on priorities and a shared understanding. We really tried to develop a process focused on identifying as much agreement and facilitating trade-offs among these varying interests of the group. So we developed guiding principles and some relevant plans. And I want to talk a little bit about the relevant plans that we were referring to throughout the work group. So, high level, importance of off-leash areas. We really recognize that off-leash dogs represent an opportunity for socialization in our park system and exercise for many, many long-term park users. Folks have been going to these parks for many decades. We all sort of agreed on the importance of welcoming all park users, that parks should be open to as many residents as possible. We all agreed generally that park uses that infringe on other people's enjoyment through unwanted interactions generally degrade the overall experience for our residents throughout the park system. And that we have an important focus on natural resources in the city, that all land uses should be implemented with the goal of reducing impact as much as possible, and that a healthy natural world is highly regarded in the city of Minnetonka. So there's two related documents, the Parks Open Space and Trails Plan, what's known as the POST Plan, the Natural Resources Master Plan, the NRMP, and we also performed a restoration and management plan for the Purgatory Park, as well as a Purgatory Park Master Plan. So a little bit of the summary of the recommendations of the work group, 3 buckets essentially. So recommendations around planning. These are criteria related to the location and distribution of these off-leash areas in the city of Minnetonka, Minnetonka and beyond. Design, these are criteria related to the specific design aspects of off-leash areas, wherever they may be located. And operations considerations, things about how do we pick up the trash easy, is there appropriate signage for education and enforcement of the rules. So a brief rundown of the planning recommendations of the work group. Generally, everybody agreed that these should be having some sort of distance from residential properties to alleviate the sound and disturbance. And of course, that's dependent on the location within our park system. That we'd have some sort of size based on the other available criteria and site considerations. That we generally have access and parking, ideally dedicated parking with some ADA compliance. That these off-leash areas would have some sort of distribution throughout the city. This sort of led to 2 buckets, essentially, of off-leash areas, what I called naturalized. So these would be minimal, about 2 acres or more, have some sort of loop trail system, and have a combination of what we're calling hard and soft barriers, and I'll get into that a little bit more. And then this suburban style, I hesitated to call it urban because we're in Minnetonka, but these are more the traditional in-city style hard barriers, highly trafficked areas, easy to jump on and off the road to take your dog for a walk, more common in cities, but there was some interest in potentially implementing some of those. So the design recommendations, so 2 types of barriers. So what I'm calling quote unquote hard barriers, these would be fences with gates and controlled entrances, like you see at Three Rivers Park District, there are off-leash dog areas. There's a big one in Eden Prairie. And then soft barriers we talked about quite a bit. So these would be natural barriers that would provide the limiting of that unwanted interaction through distance, site distance, natural topography, or barriers that would reduce those unwanted interactions. Environmental protection, signage, amenities, waste management. So we wanted to sort of consider all these things about the practical nature of these off-leash areas. Ideally, we'd be locating them in areas of lower plant community quality, areas that have invasive species or are otherwise disturbed, that there'd be some natural buffer from water bodies because of the waste concern, that we would have very clear and concise signage that would convey the rules. The signage could help clarify these soft barriers where they were implemented, and that there'd be appropriate location and amount of waste bags and trash cans so folks didn't have to walk around with poop in their hands. So implementation. Purgatory Park is on the table tonight. So we've identified best locations for immediate consideration of the development of designated off-leash areas, and these would kick in on May 19th. So we applied criteria with various results, and there was really no true consensus on the specific size or location of these areas in Purgatory. So staff is recommending these 2 areas, trying our best to apply the established criteria and input from the work group, but really this is an attempt at a compromise. So Area 1 and Area 2 in Purgatory Park. So Area 1 is the northern one. This is approximately just over 7 acres to just about 10 acres. These proposed areas would have barriers that are developed on site according to the criteria. So whether or not we would need a hard barrier if it was closer to a trail, or a soft barrier where there was a great sight distance. We would do updated signage and amenities such as way stations and trash receptacles. Area 1 is limited mostly to existing low-quality degraded habitat. There is some high-quality area there, though. There could be invasive species removal to open these areas a little bit more. Currently, folks sort of walk through a tunnel to get to the prairie, the open area on the south side. We could do some removal and reseeding of native species to open that up a little bit, make that more prairie-like, which tends to be the destination of folks in the park. The idea here would be that off-leash area is enforceable and generally contained to limit those unwanted interactions as much as possible. So the hard barriers would include fencing in key areas adjacent to trails or parking, but they would be easy access. There's certainly some unwanted dog behavior when a leashed dog comes across an unleashed dog. So designing these entrances in a way that would limit those tensions as best as possible. And then determining those soft barriers in the field based on the distance to reduce those unwanted interactions and sort of evolving that over time. So again, these proposed areas really attempt to best meet the criteria as I read them through the work group. We are making clear concessions here on a variety of the criteria in an attempt to really balance as many interests as possible. Citywide, beyond Purgatory, briefly I want to talk about that we did talk through as a work group additional park areas. These are in large community parks and smaller neighborhood parks, both the naturalized and the suburban type park that I mentioned, to accommodate both these types, that we ideally would have a citywide distribution of these off-leash areas to folks throughout Minnetonka. We do have an in-place park master planning process set where we go out to citywide and local community outreach and engagement when we do this master planning process like we did for Purgatory. There were areas identified by the work group that would be included in these master planning efforts going forward. For instance, Big Willows is set to be master planned this year, so we would go to those outreach events and say the community work group developed these criteria, they identified this area in Big Willow, and we would come back to the park board and the eventual city council and say this is what we heard related to this off-leash area when it comes to these parks as they get master planned. And then there are a number of smaller parks that the work group identified, and these would sort of, based on staff availability and as need, we would bring these to the park board and look closer at them and try to apply the criteria as best as we could. So I tried to keep it short and sweet. What changes, if any, to the Minnetonka off-leash dog strategy and guidance document would you like to see? I'm more than happy to answer questions and facilitate the conversation as best as I can. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, thanks a lot, Matt. I just want to clarify or go through our process at this point. What happens next now is that the park board will be able to ask questions in a question phase, and then after that, any questions are finished with Matt, then the park board can begin any deliberation or consideration, conversation about the recommendation. At this point, I think you probably, those in the audience know this, at this point the park board is not taking public comments at this meeting. That's a determination of the city council. They will be taking comments at that meeting when they review this on May 5th. So with that, I'll open it to questions from the park board for Matt. Ann?
Well, thanks for all your work on this. I know it's been fun. It's been challenging because there is no obvious answer that's going to make everybody happy. I would like to hear more about your thoughts on Area 2.
Certainly. Yes, I did breeze through the definitions of the area here. Area 2 is on a parcel. It's sort of a topographic knoll through that area. It is south of what we call the Oak Ridge, which was identified in the Natural Resources Master Plan as a high quality restoration area, and we've since done buckthorn clearing through there. There's some very mature oaks on that ridge. That area too sort of has a distinct topographic edge to it, if you will. There was an old house up there that got torn down some time ago, and it is a bit of an open field. So that area is 6 to 8 plus acres and could potentially be accomplished with a variety of these hard and soft barriers based on the topography alone.
It's pretty far from parking.
It is. It does concede on that particular criteria that there is no discrete parking on Stadola. Stadola, there's no additional parking plan for Stadola. That was eliminated out of the park master plan process. So it will remain a cul-de-sac. So that Area 2 does concede that there is no nearby parking and certainly no ADA accessibility.
As a relatively new member of this commission, I've had a ferocious game of catch-up here in reading lots and lots of documents and history, and I thank all the people in the audience who've sent in a lot of emails, and this is a very passionate issue on for many people. I'd like to know if there were other areas considered besides Area 1 and 2, as I have been told by several people, the northwest corner is an area, the Red Barn area is an area. I'd like to know why those weren't considered in this plan.
Yep, there were two areas, northwest, northeast. Those both had concessions regarding the criteria. So northeast is considered by the NRMP a high quality maple basswood forest through there. And the northwest is highly degraded, but it is adjacent to residential property. The other consideration is neither of those would be ready on May 19th.
Again, maybe this is a naive question, I'm new. Does it have to be ready on May 19th? Is that something that's mandatory?
Well, I'll take a crack at that. The way the ordinance was written by the city, as of May 19th, there are no off-leash dogs in Minnetonka except in designated off-leash areas. So we have to have an off-leash area designation on May 19th, or there will be no off-leash areas by ordinance. So that's why that's critical. Not to say you couldn't make changes in some future date, but clearly we need to have a resolution for this for May 19th. Katie?
Hey, Matt, thank you
Hi.
for all of your work, and everyone on the working group, too, for your tireless hours debating this passionate topic. Matt, the area of Area 1 looks much smaller than it is today for off-leash dogs. Can you talk about why?
So there is a sort of a hard boundary, both the chain link fence between Scenic Heights Forest. I think folks can see my mouse here, but there's a chain link fence and a highly used trail through there. So folks tend to gather up in here and look south down the prairie. The NRMP does describe this area as high quality via its ecological assessment. And there is significant restoration that has gone on adjacent southeast of this area here. The other somewhat boundary is the wetland. The soils get soft there. Folks do walk down the creek there, but for us to officially call that an off-leash area would violate that criteria about sensitive water bodies, which Purgatory Creek would be.
Other questions? Otherwise, I've got some, but Caleb.
So, presupposing that this moves from the park board to the city council and the city council approves it, we're talking about maybe 2 weeks to put up what we hope is long-term, money well spent, off-leash areas. And I guess I'm concerned that we're not going to hit that timeline. But secondarily, I also wonder, at least in my limited knowledge, I was under the impression that it was the identification of an off-leash area, not the actual functional finished product of that off-leash area that had to be in place, or that the ordinance demonstrated needed to be in place by May 19th. Can you clarify?
Correct. So that's why we use this term designated off-leash areas, and they can be designated with signage. So on May 19th, we could have a map out there that says, here's the area, and we could have some signage in place to generally indicate where the edges of that will be, and then we would incorporate the fencing over time as we get cost estimates and contractors lined up. So there'd be a initial designation period and then the implementation of the barriers.
So just to follow up, this proposal is to allow off-leash in these areas even when there's no barriers, hard or soft, to the public. So it's similar to, I guess, current existing practice within the city.
These would be considered designated areas, and these would be the only 2 designated areas in the city on May 19th. So, yes.
In some document, I saw the idea that the fencing would be put up in the summer.
Yes, so the
So
report,
not immediately, but
I
shortly.
neglected to mention that. The report does theorize a time frame where we'd be able to cost estimate and bring in contractors and try to get a sense of where the fence would go.
Jennifer?
Thank you. Question for you, Matt, kind of along the same lines as far as I read that the master plan for Purgatory was recently approved in 2003, 2004, and it seems to identify a different location for an off-leash dog park, and I'd like to know why the master plan was disregarded or not heavily relied upon. Was it timing, or I'll leave it open?
The figure in the master plan showcases what was in line with the ordinance at that time. So there was some distance applied to, the ordinance talked about unimproved areas. So that figure essentially added sort of a buffer around the edges of the park and the key trails. It also had a note that essentially instructing us to develop this community work group and look in closer to what these areas could look like, both citywide and in Purgatory Park. So it was sort of an interim step until the ordinance got changed officially.
Thank you. But along those lines, as far as the location, that it needs to be in the middle of the park, was there some best management practices that said that a dog park cannot be along the border of a park? I did do some research with the Three Rivers Park District, and I noticed all of theirs were on the edge of the parks, not in the interior. That may be one exception.
Certainly. That was a qualitative conversation of the work group. Where do we think it would be appropriate as a neighbor in Minnetonka? Would you welcome a dog park adjacent to your residential property? There is no true, this is the way you design a dog park document. It was sort of part of the discussion of the community work group.
Thank you.
I guess I've got some questions. Just starting with Area 1, can you talk a little bit more about, as Jennifer mentioned, I think, or Katie mentioned, it seems smaller on the southern side of that. And at the same time, there's areas on, I'll call it the north side, right near the entrance, which look usable, but today really aren't. Is there some plan around opening space up there to try to offset the loss of space in the lower part?
I think we're presenting the criteria in this general plan as a philosophy to move forward, and we can certainly adapt as necessary. Or if we're willing to make concessions on particular criteria, then we can go ahead and change these figures at this point. But otherwise, it's meant to be somewhat of a living document.
And in Area 2, it's substantially smaller than what was in the Purgatory Master Plan. And that concerns me a lot. I guess I'm just curious how, and it's hard, for me personally anyways, it's hard in these visuals to kind of tell exactly where I know you want to cite stuff later, but it's also kind of hard to tell how, is the main trail along the top of the ridge in the zone or out of the zone?
Yep.
Is the grassy homestead in the zone or out of the zone? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I certainly understand. I'm familiar with the park quite a bit. So sort of the northeast barrier is the distinction of that high-quality oak ridge, currently as drawn. The south side is the trail, and the southwest side is a dip in the topography. So there's sort of two mounds there with a saddle between them. There were two homes at one point. So this area to the southwest is sort of that saddle where it gets real close to the trail again, and that seemed like a logical soft barrier topographic location, but certainly up for consideration. That seemed like a natural feature that would accomplish the soft barriers, I should say.
Looking at other parks, leaving Purgatory for a second, in the listing, if I recall, in the listing of potential future areas, Jadana, I don't believe is mentioned at all. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, Jadana is not mentioned based on that criteria of high quality plant communities, which is what the Natural Resources Master Plan has it listed as.
Okay.
100% of that park. I just know it's highly used by dogs today.
There is a central area where the Boy Scouts camp, and I believe that's considered cultural in the Natural Resources Master Plan, but otherwise the oak forest there was considered high quality at that time.
Would there ever be consideration given to having, in the case of a Jadana, I'll call it a frozen park? In other words, when the winter comes along, those wetlands between the Jadana all the way to the dam are heavily trafficked by walkers and particularly dog people, some mountain bike people. Is that something that the city could envision, a seasonal park, so to speak, for off-leash area?
As directed by the park board, we'd be happy to come up with guidance or recommendations as needed.
Okay.
Certainly
There might be
everything's on
an
the
issue
table.
with dog waste in the wetland.
There could be. Other questions? Yes, Jennifer.
I have another question as far as how does keeping the off-leash dog park in the same location address any conflict of issues if there is currently?
Well, part of it would relate to the actual implementation of the barriers, but also a discrete enforceability limit that would help our public safety enforce. So it'd be generally, ideally, a little more clear if the dog was in or outside of the area. It would have some distinction or discrete nature for the police, either using a map or soft barriers and signage in the field to make that call.
And as a follow-up, I've noticed a number of residents using the trails with off-leash dogs on the trails. Is there a proposal for this to be included or outside of those trails?
The trails were never unmaintained officially. So according to our previous ordinance, you weren't supposed to have your dog off leash on what we call the primary trails, the trails that we actively maintain. Part of the work group criteria was to establish areas large enough that there could be a footpath network established through them so you get that outdoor walking experience. But our primary trail system, you're not supposed to have your dog off leash.
Any other questions? If not, we'll go to discussion. And I think it's fair to say that we are here to either approve or not approve the recommendation, or the recommendation with modifications or amendments to it. So it's not necessarily yay or nay on this recommendation. It's what the park board wants to put forward to the city council. So, anyone with discussion? Ann?
Okay, and mic is on, good. I don't, when I look at the map that shows Area 1 in pink, and I look at some of the other maps that we have in from the master plans and so on, that at least it looks to me like half of Area 1 is native prairie, and that would be high quality. And to my eye, just eyeballing it, it looks like there's more high quality area there than there is up in the northern part between the fire station and the Red Barn area. As Jennifer was alluding to, Area 1 has entrances that are that require people to walk across the maintained trails into the area. So I don't see that it does anything to mitigate the conflict between on and off leash dogs. One of the things that was important in the Purgatory Master Plan was the sight lines from the high parts of the prairie, where you're looking across the prairie and the wetlands, and I think having a fenced area in the middle is less scenic. I'm concerned about how close Area 1 is to the wetlands. If I know people try to pick up after their dogs, but if the dog is in the cattails and you can't see him or her, it's hard to pick up. Having it in Area 1, to me, chops the prairie up into smaller pieces. I'd like to see us linking prairie chunks together instead of pulling them apart. So instead, I would suggest an 8.5 acre part in the northeast part of the park, from the entrance road over to the fire station. If you've got, so at the parking lot, you've got the off-leash dog people going north and everybody else going south, and so there's, I would say, better separation. So that would reduce the conflict. I know that some of Area A is high-quality maple basswood, but some of it's more medium, and it would be lovely shaded area in the hot summer, because of the topography in there with the, sorry, using my words, the trolley berm. You can get some trails, extra trails in there where you can't, if you're on one side of the berm and somebody's on the other side of the berm, you can't see them. So there's more opportunity there for interesting trails, I think. There are utilities there from the house that used to be there, so there could be water, there could be a foot area for dogs to drink and for washing their feet. At some point, we could add a little wading pool for the dogs. So I had a few more, but I'll stop.
Other discussion?
Just question, Ann, the proposal that you've just made in a modification would be unlikely to meet that time deadline by May 19th. So,
Well, because
because none of it's been evaluated yet, and none of it has been sort of put into a position of either soft or hard barriers, so.
Well, the barriers, hard or soft barriers, we have the same issue for one, or what I'm going to call Area A, because that's what it's called in some of the documents. There's very little buckthorn there. It wouldn't take tons of clearing like the northwest corner would have taken. We might want to put up a quick fencing along Excelsior Boulevard. I don't think people are going to go all the way down there, but that it could be done. It might not be permanent fencing. So I have faith that it could be done.
Are we in a position to create modifications, recognizing that we have a deadline for May 19th? Because I think what is evolving in my mind, again, because I'm new to this, I'm coming at it hopefully with a fresh set of eyes, is I really don't like any of these proposals.
Okay. We don't want any feedback. You're observing any yays or nays, support or disagreement. We really don't want tonight, but thank you.
But to your point about Jadana earlier, I would like to see a more comprehensive dog policy plan put into place that would incorporate off-leash activities at Purgatory as well as other parks, so dog owners who are very passionate, I'm a dog owner, I'm passionate about my dog also, could feel that they have options. And I think that it's sort of incumbent upon us to look at this as a comprehensive, holistic approach, not park by park. And if we need to do something by May 19th, create an interim solution, but keep it interim, and then look forward to a more comprehensive discussion, because the very passionate people who love Area 1 right now want to keep it that way, and I understand their perspective. And the people who live near Area 2 do not like the traffic or the issues associated with that very beautiful hilltop savanna area. And again, as in all government, it's a balancing act, and I'd rather do it right than do it fast.
Katie?
I hear what you're saying, and I feel like your proposal is kind of what you're saying, right? It's an interim short-term solution with other park areas in the future to be explored. And we can do it as a comprehensive plan instead of park by park. That's a you know, an interesting tweak. But I am perceiving this as the short-term interim solution for the park that's the most heavily used with the most passionate off-leash dog owners.
That's great if there's signage, but the minute you put up fencing, it no longer becomes interim.
No?
No, and you've wasted a lot of money.
There could be more temporary fencing. Something slightly more substantial than snow fence, for example.
It's probably not aesthetic. It certainly doesn't play into the issue of soft barriers. It's a hard barrier. And again, it's probably not needed because there's very little problem with dogs in that area right now.
Which area are you referring
Area
to?
1.
Area 1 is where the primary issue with dogs is today.
Yes. Right.
Most of the issues along Area 1 are the perimeter along the main trail. That's where the primary issues have been in terms of off-leash, on-leash, strollers, etc. So if we were to go forward, I could not support anything going forward that doesn't provide some level of safety along those primary trails where there's close proximity to dogs. The area here today, and again, Matt's picture doesn't, I think, extend that far down, but a primary walking area today is within 15 feet of the main trail. And it's very reasonable that a dog is not going to halt right within that close together without some sort of visual or some sort of discriminating barrier. I guess I'll comment on your comments. Having been on this park board, I don't know, maybe 5 years or 6 years, this is not an undiscussed, unreviewed topic. We've been talking about this for a long time, particularly as it pertains to purgatory. And the Purgatory Master Plan discussion was pretty extensive, had a lot of public input submitted as well as in meetings. And so I think we have the information we need to try to make a decision on purgatory for tonight. I do think the idea of the way the ordinance is written where there's no off-leash dogs anywhere else that aren't designated, I don't know that we can stay to a time frame where we're looking at new parks in 2028, 2027, because there's pent-up demand for this. I guess I'll go. If there aren't other comments, I've got some comments. I've been going to purgatory for over 30 years with my dogs. I was out there 20 years ago speaking in front of either the park board or the city council in support of off-leash dogs in purgatory. At that time, the primary issue was safety or comfort around, concern around interaction between off-leash dogs and people on the main trails, walking, jogging, biking, people with dogs on leashes on the main trails. And that was the primary concern. And then as now, technically, that's not a concern because those dogs shouldn't have been off leash on those trails anyways. So to take a position that we need to ban dogs in purgatory because of that was like, well, we already have an ordinance, we just need to have it enforced. We need better behavior on the part of people. Since that time, some things have changed and some things have remained the same. What's changed is just absolutely significantly more use of the informal trails. When and a lot of you I think would recall this, you used to get out of the parking lot and start down that trail and it might have been 4.5 or 5 feet wide. Today it extends from all the foliage, so it's maybe 20 feet wide. And the path down the center used to be a sandy little sliver, and now it's pretty wide. And if you go up into the hills, which is my favorite part, it was like single tracking, and today it's 4 or 5 feet wide because of heavy use. So there's just so much more use in the park, and that's good because people are using the park, but it also creates some issues around erosion and overuse and people making new trails that cut off the length of an old trail. So basically it's not necessary, but it's going to go. If you think about parking in the cul-de-sac at Stavola, you used to kind of go up and have to go this way, and now someone's decided, well, I can just go straight up here. And now you have two trails getting to the same point and one that's straight up and down, which is not a great erosion situation. So there's significantly more use. We've made, since then, major investments in restoration efforts, a lot of city dollars and a lot of volunteers' time, I think to very great positive effect. That's a positive thing. And very recently, I think the formation of the dog owners group is the start of a positive thing, because I think that one of the things that would be most effective for improving behaviors in the park where there shouldn't be people with off-leash dogs is to have a sense of community around self-enforcement. Hey, you really should have your dog leashed on the primary trail. And I think the Paws for Parks has been trying to address that, and their website does a good job of showing kind of where you on-leash and off-leash and that. So I think that's a very positive thing. What hasn't changed is, I'll call it safety. That may sound a little strong, but there's still a lot of people that have expressed concern around feeling comfortable in the park if they're not with off-leash dogs. And they're not in the off-leash dog area, they're on the primary trails. Our surveys show that there is a significant number of people that have stopped going to purgatory because of that concern of not feeling comfortable. And today you still have, despite, I think, some good improvements in terms of, I'll call it leash behavior on the main trails, you still have the bad actors that, are out there with their dogs off leash where they shouldn't be. And that's a concern. And I know some people in the audience will say, well, nothing bad ever happens. It does. It's not massive numbers, but it does. And to say it doesn't isn't correct. What also is the same is an incredibly strong sense of community in the park among dog owners. It doesn't matter if it's the 8 o'clock group or the 9 o'clock group or whatever time you go, there's always people that are, gathering and socializing. And it's not like there's 100 people with their dogs in the park at any one point in time. It's a flow, a constant flow through the day of people of a very manageable number at any one point in time. But it's a great sense of community, and that's important. As it pertains to the recommendation, my position remains as it's been throughout the whole development of the Purgatory Master Plan. So for those of you who are going to those meetings, you've already heard me say a lot of this. Relative to the working group output, I was on the working group. I think it has some positive benefits. But the Purgatory Master Plan is a much more significant commitment of time, resources, and effort around addressing the issue of off-leash dogs in Purgatory. The current recommendation today that we're talking about addresses the issue of needing hard barriers, which is critical. And I've had that position for a while, not everywhere, but in areas where there's needed separation. We are looking, I think, with barriers not to create dog parks, which in my mind is nothing wrong with them, but is a very enclosed area with your classic double gate entry. And you're there in a dog park and you're not, it'd be very unusual or feel weird to be walking through a dog park if you don't have your dog. And as some people have submitted comments relative to Area 2 in particular, I don't personally believe our intention there would be to have a dog park enclosure, because then people who want to hike and bird and things in that area are going to feel like they have to enter an enclosure, and that's not the intention. So I support the recommendations effort to try to reduce the impact of the prairie grass in Area 1. I may be misreading this or not, but I think the top of the visual of Area 1, it looks to me like there's a chance to maybe clear some of the entry sort of undergrowth, if you will, shrubs, not shrubs, they're small trees, to create more open space there that would be today that isn't used by dogs because it's kind of dense, but to open that up. But personally, that would, I think, would be maybe help mitigate that. But relative to Area 2 and the area I'll call it from the ridge down to the south-southwest is, to me, very unacceptable. It's way too small. It needs to be, in my mind, expanded to be consistent with what the master plan was. And any hard barriers would be kept at a minimum, perhaps demarcating when you get to the main trail. If you're crossing from, I'll call it, the southeast corner to the south or east side to the west side of that trail, an area that kind of says, okay, here you're supposed to leash your dog up to cross this 12 feet of asphalt or whatever it is. But I don't view those areas personally of being enclosed. I do think the working group, I don't think the working group was configured to really deal with Purgatory. We didn't have enough time and we weren't able to go into enough specificity, certainly not to the degree we did in the master plan. It was, in my mind, beneficial around criteria for future park development, as well as having some, the group has some, I think, very good discussions around identifying future potential park opportunities. And my personal plug would be for, I think, I'll call it the Big Willow Mills Landing corridor along Minnetonka Boulevard. Now that the city's purchased that piece of property, I think that would be a great area for, that's not being used today, that could be used for off-leash dogs. And it's a pretty sizable piece of real estate. And then possibly the Civic Center behind the athletic fields, and in a perfect world, extending a bridge across to Mooney to create that space, because again, that's underutilized. The Civic Center provides plenty of parking, and if you could bridge across to Mooney, I don't think probably there's maybe, well, I can't ask for feedback because we're not supposed to get that, but I'm guessing very few hands would go up on it if I said how many people here have walked in the Mooney Park. Anyways, so bottom line, for me personally, I won't be able to support a motion tonight that doesn't incorporate what we previously approved as part of the Purgatory Master Plan. I think we could make finesses off of that. I don't know if we have that map or not, because it is different. But if we did, maybe that would be beneficial for the new members on the park board. But that's my perspective.
Dave, what are your thoughts on that northeast corner as a 30-year-old veteran, 30-year veteran at the park?
I
and use
really
our
like
park?
well, I'll comment on both spots. The northwest corner to me, which is the really, I guess, degraded area, is a mystery. I've been up there. There's almost no place in the Minnetonka Park I haven't been. I've been up there, and I think it actually is more promising than I think if you were to clear everything out, because it's got rolling topography. But it'd be a lot of work because there's a whole lot of stuff up there, and it's close to homes. I guess the big plus is, from a NERP perspective, it's low quality vegetation growth up there. I really like the area. If we take the Red Barn in, which again today is not part of the park system, which again is the reason why 519 isn't a great solution. I think from the Red Barn all the way to the firehouse is really intriguing, including I'd throw in the grassy area just to the north of the parking lot, because that's
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, that would be, I think that would be a great area. I'm not a naturalist, so I don't know the basswood, the pristine. It is really pristine. I just don't know the relative values, but I think that's a great area. But I know I'm a little concerned based on the feedback of how. I mean, some people would rate that even more valuable than the prairie, I think, in terms of its uniqueness. But again, that would be one that's would be future, because you'd have to fence along Minnetonka Boulevard. The pluses was plenty of parking. There's no neighbors that are not, other than the firehouse. And that would be one I would be, either of those two would be curious to look at for some future date. But at that point, if we're investing in that, would you do that there, or would you use that investment more somewhere else geographically within the city to separate that stuff? It's really hard for me as a long-term user of Purgatory to kind of view, okay, we've fixed the northeast corner, so we're going to take away the area around Area 2, let's say. That would just seem really hard for me. One of our criteria was that there's at least a 2-mile loop trail. And about the only way you can do that is by expanding the area 2, consistent with what we had in the Purgatory Master Plan.
Does anyone have access to that master plan image that Dave keeps referencing?
Page 45.
Thanks. I have it sort of ingrained in my head, but not to the detail you described. Very good.
Do you want to speak to that, Matt? What the thinking was there?
Yes, Chair Graham. This was page 45 from the Purgatory Park Master Plan. The red is areas that were limited by the old ordinance. So that covers the sort of a buffer from park property, and then there's sort of a corridor around the primary trails that this figure said off-leash dogs shouldn't be in those red areas, essentially.
So for clarification, that was in the old ordinance, not the new ordinance?
This was drawn based on the old ordinance language. This document led to the city council directing us to write new ordinance language.
But the new ordinance doesn't necessarily impact the way, at least the way I think about it, doesn't impact where we draw the lines.
Designated areas.
Yeah.
So Dave, are you proposing then that everything that's not pink is going to be open to dogs?
That's what was in the master plan that we approved.
It says identify and better define specific areas where off-leash activity is allowable. This shows, well, this shows where it's not allowable and not allowable under the old plan. Old ordinance, sorry.
But the ordinance, unless someone wants to correct me, I don't think the ordinance impacts necessarily how we draw this map at all.
Okay, so, well, let me
Other-
say it
other
another
than-
way.
Other than, Mike, the key difference to me in the ordinance is in the old ordinance, you had a lot of mumbo jumbo about voice control. So you could be on the main trail under voice control. And then we changed the signs to make it clear that they needed to be leashed. But the advantage of the new ordinance is it becomes more enforceable now for a community service officer to stop somebody in the main trail who's walking their dog off leash and say, like again, as a 30-year veteran, in the old days when things were different and we had less demands, the community services used to drive that main trail and give out tickets from time to time for people being off leash. And we don't do that anymore. We could, but it's you know, there's probably better uses of resources. But yeah, what this is the map that was voted on and approved at the park board last year.
And the issues that we were trying to solve at that time are the same as the issues
That we're trying to
now,
solve now.
right? The issues haven't gotten significantly worse. If anything, I think
No.
it's a little better. But there hasn't, to your point, there hasn't been a dramatic change or in the issues that we're trying to solve since we did this a year ago.
No, that's right. And this was, you know, we spent an awful lot of time on this, or Matt spent an awful lot of time on developing this plan and making changes. I think we went through, or you went through 2 or 3 different versions of this before it finally came to the city, to the park board for our approval. And in the working group effort, we didn't get to this level of specificity around purgatory. We were starting with very high level, let's set goals, let's set priorities, let's set criteria around a park, a dog area. It was not, we didn't really get specific on any park. So when we say we couldn't come to consensus on purgatory, from my perspective, we never really attempted to come to consensus because we never got down to the hard brass tacks of where things would be in purgatory. So this is, from my perspective, this would be what I would propose to the city council. Now, we could talk about, obviously we can talk about anything, but you know, there's parts of this I could see, you know, do we really have to have the whole area? I guess this is backward. This is not north-south oriented. This is east-west oriented. Everything to the west of the creek on this visual, does that need to be off leash? There's very few trails on there other than along the creek. So maybe that was, some of that more was shaded salmon colored or not. But the key areas there, I think, are, and the other thing is, the importance of having hard barriers along that eastern primary trail, which is on the top of this map. North, it looks like it's north, but it's the eastern side of this map. I think that's the most critical part. It creates a buffer for Nantucket homeowners, but most importantly, it also addresses people using that primary trail for walking and want to be there with their kids in strollers or their reactive dogs on leashes, or want to bike through there and not feel, it's great to go through there and see all the dogs in the center. It's not so great when you have your dog who's highly reactive on leash along that path, and all of a sudden the dogs come over and want to meet my reactive dog, who of course was a golden retriever, and everyone thinks golden retrievers are always great. And Wally had some issues with other dogs. So anyways, that's where I think the hard barrier there was important.
I personally can't support having all the prairie be open to dogs.
Why was it okay a year ago, though, when we approved this?
I don't remember that we were approving this as where dogs could go. To me, it was,
Well, it's pretty clear here with the pink or the salmon being areas they're kept from.
but it says recommendations include to identify and better define areas where off-leash dogs are acceptable, allowable, and to mitigate points of conflict. And I don't see how leaving it all open to off-leash dogs does any of that. It doesn't protect the high-quality habitat, and it doesn't mitigate the conflict areas.
Well, when I voted, I interpreted it as it looks here, and as an example on well, I'll just call it, everyone knows the park here, but the knoll that's across the bridge headed north, the knoll on the right, the grassy knoll that's now in the salmon area is protected. You can walk up there personally or with a dog on leash, but where there's a lot of restoration effort gone there, that's now protected. The area along the fence line where there's been restoration going on is protected. So there are areas here that, the prairie's not part of that, but there are areas that were under restoration that are designated, protected on this.
For me, it's not enough.
Okay. And for me, the other one's not enough, so. Any other discussion? Okay, well,
I'm not sure we've helped you very much.
well, we're going to help them by having
gonna have
some
to-
sort of resolution
we're
or
gonna need to vote
recommendation
something.
that goes to the city council. At this point.
Can I go for
Yeah,
a little
go
bit
ahead,
of discussion? And it does go a little bit to the resolution, but, I think we're looking for a win-win where we have a park that we can have an off-leash area for people to enjoy their pets, as well as safe areas for people and dogs who are not comfortable in off-leash area, which my dog fits in that category as well. But very passionate with that and trying to find the balance between the natural resource that Minnetonka represents and is proud of, as well as I don't think the natural resources will exist without the people who support them. So I think that there's trying to find that balance, and I feel like the time crunch, I don't want to rush into a decision because of the ordinance that's imminent. And so I don't want to make a decision that will have a long-term effect, being in haste for what's easier from an operation and a signage than what's best for the public and our pets that we love. So I think to that extent, is there something we could recommend of an extension of that ordinance for the designation, or I'm sure that's not what the city council is looking for from us, but looking for a possible more time to,
I think, and maybe staff can comment, but I know from my recollection of the November council meeting was, city attorney was very concerned around making sure that something was in place by May 19th, because the ordinance is written that way.
Yeah, just to clarify, the ordinance is already on the books. It has basically like a trigger date of May 19th. And so the charge was to, recognizing that as of May 19th, in parks, dogs have to be on a leash. They can be in our parks, anywhere in our parks, but they have to be on a leash. As of May 19th, they can only be off leash where has been designated. So that's the crux of it.
our dilemma for today.
So I think, unless someone else has a comment, I think right now what we need to have is some motion. The motion could be to accept and move forward or recommend, approve the recommendation as presented. I think it could be, a motion could be to approve the recommendation with modifications. I suppose there could be a motion to bypass that and go back and approve the Purgatory Master Plan, for all I know. I'm not sure on that. But fundamentally, we need some form of motion, or we could reject the recommendation, and which I don't think helps a lot. So I think, we could have any kind of, basically what goes forward here is not necessarily the recommendation, but what the park board creates. Caleb.
So I guess point of clarification, can someone describe for me the definition of designated in this ordinance? Both the degree and the time.
I can take a stab at that. So the purpose of using the phrase designated was purposely vague in that it gave us some leeway to decide what that would mean. Basically, the ordinance says designated by barriers and or signage. It essentially was intentionally vague for us to determine what that meant in the future. I'd have to pull up the particular language, but it is to that effect.
Okay, well, I can think of instances where a space is designated as something, but nothing's there, right? This is a designated future site of, right? But it's been designated. As opposed to, as of now, this is what this is, right? This is designated as this. So those, to me, are two different things. And I think they're critical to the function of this ordinance. And as a follow-up, so I do think it's very important to be more specific, even though vague language was chosen. Now, it may offer the city council the opportunity to define that more clearly, but it may be construed as a hindrance to a final product that would satisfy all interested parties to the degree that this will satisfy anyone fully. So that's a point that I am working through. The second thing is, as you kind of phrased it, there's a trigger date, there's a date of onset. So is there a date? Is there a implication, ramification for there not being, however we're defining designated, to be in place by May 19th? Does that trigger the dissolution of this ordinance?
No, Chair Ingraham and Park Board members, the way the ordinance is as of May 19th, dogs need to be on a leash throughout the city and in our parks. As of May 19th, they can only be off leash in areas where we have deemed as designated. There's there's nothing in the ordinance that says, pending something happening, or if nothing happens, we'll give it another 30 days. There's nothing like that in the ordinance.
I would also add that designation can be accomplished via mapping. So a line on a map and us as the city saying that's the designated area, that would then accomplish that goal of it being officially designated, for us to map it and sign it in the park.
And communicated to
And communicate it.
the community. I do feel like we owe it to our community members to make a decision. They've been waiting months for this decision since the ordinance was announced. So if we delayed it all, I'd want to have a very specific timeline and plan. I'd prefer not to, because I feel like we owe it to our community members.
But plus, if we delay it, then the ordinance goes into effect as is. So, I mean, it can be delayed, but then technically, dogs need to be unleashed everywhere, and we're going to have massive non-compliance in Purgatory Park. So, understandably.
So my proposal was get rid of Area 1 and replace it with what I call Area A, which is the
The northeast corner?
northeast corner, yes. From the road all the way to the fire station, from the parking lot north to Excelsior Boulevard. And I'm willing to say 2 can be whatever size Dave wants. But south of the ridge.
So is that a motion?
Yeah, let's make that a motion. I move that Area 1 be removed and be replaced with Area A, and that Area 2 would be expanded. I don't know what to say about where.
So if I can ask a clarification, Red Barn is not currently in the park. I don't know if that's a factor or not. It's not part of the park area yet.
Is it a big deal?
The city owns it. It's not officially
Okay.
in that tax boundary, but the city owns it.
So we have a what do you call it, motion.
And I wasn't quite done.
Okay.
I further would direct staff to work as quickly as possible to look at the Minnetonka Mills area, particularly using that new land from Minnetonka Boulevard north, from Minnetonka Mills west till you get to the higher quality habitat, which is a pretty good chunk of space. So that then we have 2 parks with pretty good sized designated areas for off-leash. I think, Dave, somebody needs to weigh in on a little bit more specificity about Area 2.
Well, I think, first, any discussion, adjustments, or does somebody want to second it? I really like the second half of that, because basically I get to define later Area 2.
Dave gets to draw lines.
So responsibility
Not
and
so sure about Area 1, but
Can you can you help us visualize what Area A is better than when you point at the screen? I can't see what you're doing.
True.
So I need somebody else to point at the screen so I can see what you're pointing to.
So can you see he was pointing at the screen.
My cursor's there. She's talking about this area up here. This is the Red Barn site.
but you would have the Red Barn as part of it.
Yes.
So this is the entrance drive. Here's the parking lot. This is the area she is talking about.
It's 8.5 acres.
My perception of Area 1 is that it would be voted as the highest priority area by the off-leash dog users today. Based on my observations at Purgatory Park, that's where I see the most activity and the most passion around the
But
area. Is that an
nobody-
incorrect?
But nobody is using Area A.
Yes.
It's unutilized
No,
and
you
could
mean
be.
your new area.
Area A. The new area. The new area.
Oh, it's an area, what's on the recommendation, 1 and 2, or A?
1 and 2.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
I'm just
I-
thinking through the implications of dropping 1. It seems to be the
Well,
most,
that's true, but.
the
but
highest priority
even-
area
Even
today.
that one of the few things that the community working group actually agreed on was that the high-quality areas should not be used for off-leash dog areas, and that's, it's practically the only prairie in Minnetonka.
But Leslie, I think you weigh in that the area you're talking about is a high-quality area, correct?
According to the Natural Resources Master Plan, we do have high-quality habitat mapped to that northeast
Yeah.
corner as a maple
This-
basswood forest.
So see where number 1 is? The lime green number 1, that's the maple basswood, but that's one little corner. And I heard the dog community saying that they don't damage the habitat, so maybe they won't damage the trees. I don't know. But the other chunk of that is a 3, which is lower quality or lower priority for restoration. To me, this little corner of green is much smaller than all the long one. Sorry, I'm pointing again at my screen that nobody else can see, but there's a long, thin thing that's sort of like the island of Manhattan. That's the prairie, which is high quality.
It's high quality even though it's heavily used by dogs today.
And for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
It's much, it's
You were saying
it's
much
been
degree.
trampled on
Yeah.
more since COVID, since people bought 2 or 3 more dogs.
And just to clarify, on Area 1 on the north end, what's proposed is Area 1, there is the, what we call sea quality habitat as well. So the proposal was to remove buckthorn, and we could easily forestry mow that section and open that up.
Right. That's the part that's right inside the northeast perimeter of Area 1. Today, people walk straight through because of all that buckthorn and other stuff, and you're looking to open, it looks like you're looking to open that up and make that more, which would offset the loss of the space on the south side of Area 1 under Matt's recommendation.
Can we go back to the Area 1, Area 2 visual? I'd like to create an alternative proposal. I would like to eliminate Area 2 as an option at all. I would like Area 1 to be considered designated with signage and minimal, very minimal fencing, and then create an opportunity for more designation in the future with a comprehensive dog plan that we work on.
Chair Ingraham, just from a procedural standpoint,
Yes.
I just want to point out there is actually a
There's
motion on the table.
floor. I know, yeah. Yeah. So now we need to know if there's any more discussion on or a second. I haven't heard a second. If there's no second, we'll entertain a new motion, I guess, which would be Brad's talking, I guess.
Is it going to die? Is my thing going to die on the floor?
Well, there's no second.
So my alternative was, again, as a motion to eliminate Area 2 as a designation, accept Area 1 as a designation with signage and minimal fencing, and then also offer to the city council that we will work on a comprehensive dog policy. We've all talked about other parks, but we don't have it as a holistic analysis yet, and I think that's what we've got to do on the off-leash issue. And I know a lot of work's gone into this, but there's a lot of passion around it, and I think we need to be very sensitive to what our citizens are thinking.
Can you explain your rationale, just what you're trying to accomplish with that option?
Sure, it's an option where we still have an off-leash area that is very similar to the status quo today. Or that at least provides an opportunity for off-leash for people. I think Area 2 is probably very sensitive, and I don't like that it intersects a long way away from an entrance and near the neighborhoods that I think have a difficult egress and ingress. So I think Area 1's better for that. And I think this is the best of bad options, to be honest.
How, if there's not going to be fencing next to the maintained trail,
No, I said minimal fencing. I didn't say no fencing.
okay, explain minimal fencing.
I don't
then.
want a
So-
hard wire fence. Because I think ultimately, if we make the right decision, it'll be removed later.
Explain to me how the dogs are going to be kept off the maintained trail.
We'll use a snow fence, something like that.
Okay.
A soft fence. It's cheaper, but it creates a visual and barrier designation.
So is your goal to, Brad, with the fence discussion, is it to just not spend much money because we think this is just a temporary, that Area 1 in and of itself is temporary, so let's just make it cheap, but usable for the purposes of folks having an off-leash area.
And to comply with our time deadline. Yes, Caleb, that's right.
Right, but we've already clarified that there is no deadline for designating an off-leash space.
Well, yes,
This- the ordinance
yes, there
goes
is. On May
into-
19th, if we don't have something, then there will be no off-leash.
Correct, but the ordinance does not require the city council to create an off-leash.
It does.
Oh, that was my question earlier, and my understanding of the answer was that the city council is not required to make an off-leash space because the ordinance indicates, except in designated off-leash spaces, it doesn't say, and I'll just wait for staff to help me.
So thank you, Chair Graham and Park Board Member Schultz. So just to make sure I'm clear, or we're clear, the ordinance, as of May 19th, all dogs have to be on a leash. As of May 19th, in parks, they can only be off-leash if it's in an area that's been designated as an off-leash area. Now, whether that is a area that has a map and some signs up, whether it's actually completely fenced in, there's a million permutations of what that can look like. But the dog cannot be off a leash legally unless it's in an area in a park that we have designated in some fashion as being a place where it can be off-leash.
Okay, so does the city council have to create a designated place according to the ordinance?
No, it does not.
Okay, thank you.
But if they don't, there is no place. If they don't create a space,
No, I
won't
understand.
be.
I understand what it means,
Okay.
but I'm hearing from fellow park board members an interpretation that the city council has to, according to the ordinance, create a designated off-leash space. And I'd like to try to make it as clear as possible that that is not a requirement for the ordinance. Now, it does create an environment in which the city has no off-leash options for dogs, but that is a different question than what I'm trying to get an answer to.
Correct. You're right. I was trying to clarify, but you're correct. If there is no designated off-leash area, then, yeah, and the ordinance doesn't say there must be one. You're correct.
So I support your area too. I heard a lot of feedback, and I have concerns about parking because dog parks are off-leash areas are very popular, and I think there'll be a high demand. And so I don't think it's ready. And again, to the designation component, we could add designations in the future. My concerns with Area 1 is what I was asking my question before, is that it's not consistent with the master plan. And the master plan, why I didn't support your amendment, was because the master plan was showing the off-leash in the northwest corner, not the northeast. Right? Is that accurate?
that was for the northwest corner was a potential long-term, a potential future option, which would require a whole series of studies and development, and certainly if it were to be pursued, a fair amount of time and investment to clear that space.
So it wouldn't be ready now.
Not in any way, shape, or form.
Well, could I ask
Not
staff
northwest corner.
Yes.
how
thanks.
long it would take to forestry mow or whatever it would take to chew up the buckthorn that's in the northwest corner?
And while we're doing that, how long it will take to get the neighbors to agree to have the dog park in their backyard?
Chair Ingraham, Park Board. We can accomplish quite a bit of forestry mowing in a short amount of time. We actually have some restoration and maintenance dollars related to Purgatory Park that we've been reserving. We have an ongoing contract with Minnesota Native Landscapes that have performed forestry mowing in the park. We have a forestry mower at our Public Works office that we use. It's hard for me to estimate, but not terribly long, a few weeks for us to be able to finish mowing that area. And then there is follow-up mowing that would be required. Just the logistics of the forestry mowing.
If we could, since we're discussing it, if we come back to Area 2 for just a second, I think one of the perceptions may be that we're creating a dog park in Area 2. We are not creating a dog park in Area 2. We're maintaining an off-leash area that exists today. And the parking issue on Stoddle is a real... The parking issue on Stoddle is a real one today, but I would say that the majority of people using Area 2 park in the main lot or along the street when the main lot's full, not the street, but the entryway, and they march through Area 1, over the bridge, up the hill, and make a loop in there and exit. Some park on Stoddle, but I know some of the neighboring concerns on Stoddle, which is very real about traffic, is, well, if we build a dog park there, it will create demand. That exists today. The off-leash area exists today. We're not creating a Bryant Lake Park, dog park, which is fenced in and double entry and has all kinds of great signs saying, here's a dog off-leash area, not an off-leash area, off-leash dog park. So the parking concern is real, but that's just as real today. And I think if you were not having anything in Area 2, however broadly you define it, you lose a tremendous resource for dog owners that they've had it for a long time. You create much more demand on whatever space you do designate, because now you're pushing everybody into one space. I'll just throw out an anecdote from many, many years ago. Area 2 almost had a fire. There were kids smoking up in the Area 2 near the first homestead, and the only reason the fire didn't spread was because, guess what? Off-leash dog walkers came across the fire in the woods where they were smoking whatever they were smoking and reported it. So at that point in time, it was probably good there were people off-leash walking in Area 2. Otherwise, Area 2 might have had its own uncontrolled burn. So you can kind of tell I like Area 2. A big Area 2.
Dave, I like Area 2 also, but I really do think that it's a high-quality natural resource, and I also think the parking and the issue for the neighbors there is very real. And to your anecdote, that could have been a hiker there as opposed to a dog walker who put out the fire. So,
But it was a dog walker.
okay, and that's great, but it could have been anybody. So, I mean, so if there's going to be more demand, I think the demand should be at a focal point where there is good parking, good opportunity for people, to not interact in a neighborhood that's pretty crowded. And so I'm still in favor of eliminating that as an option.
Are you advocating for soft barriers in Area 2?
Yeah, as I said earlier, I think and if you've been there, people have been up there, they know there's probably 1, 2, 3, 4, probably 5, I'll call them intersections, where trails cross the primary trail from, if you go back to the page 45 map, but basically there's only about 5 intersections where people would be crossing the main trail. And at that point, I think, I'm not suggesting that you have to fence the whole area. I think it's so prescribed by history and trees and shrubs that when you get to those spots, you might have, say, a split rail fence with a gap on both sides of the trail that kind of indicates at this point you should stop and leash your dog to cross this trail. And it may seem kind of silly, but that's what we want you to do, because that's kind of how it sets up, and that's what allows you to preserve the ability to hike those loops on the south of the ridge. I would draw a line, along the ridge. I would utilize that existing main path along the top of the ridge. I'm totally fine with restricting I'll call it the north side of the ridge that drops down to the main trail. There used to be only 3 trails that went up from the main trail to the top of the ridge, and now there's probably 6. And people are just using it to get up to the top of the ridge. But I would draw the line in that main trail along the ridge line to the south, and the same thing on the east side of the trail. to this, on this map, it would be the southeast side of the main trail, much like was shown in the Purgatory Park Master Plan. But do we have a motion? We have a motion on the floor, right?
So, yeah, I just want to be clear what that motion
Yeah.
is, if I could get
Yeah,
clarification.
yeah.
Replay the tape, please. My motion was to eliminate Area 2, to designate Area 1 with soft barriers only, such as a snow fence, for the reasons that we've already identified, and then to continue forward with a comprehensive dog policy for multiple parks for off-leash analysis. I think that's what it was.
Do we have a second? Okay, if we don't have a second, then are there other motions? Otherwise, Katie, you want to, looks like
Can I have
you got your finger on it.
While you're thinking, can I ask another point of clarification? On soft versus hard, is there a cost, or can you describe any cost difference? And secondly, in regards to soft, how effective are soft? We know that hard is going to be obviously a hard stop, but
Yes.
appreciate the input.
Park Board Chair Ingraham, Park Board members. The distinction in my mind between soft, well, there is no cost to a soft barrier. We're going to utilize existing topography or existing vegetation or just the distance. Perhaps it's a creek or a visual distance where a dog wouldn't be able to see another dog or a person and dart across that. It's a qualitative assessment based on the particular conditions. Does that answer your question?
Sure. So a soft barrier is not some sort of processed barrier. Like
It's standing out
We're
in
going to build a berm. We're gonna.
No, we would not be doing earth moving or disturbing the soil. No, it's designating the area based on field conditions, standing out there. If you're standing with your dog, could it see somebody down on that trail? If so, we all generally feel like that would be the case, then that wouldn't accomplish the soft barrier. A qualitative assessment.
Did you, Katie, did you have a motion?
So the reason why I haven't seconded the motion so far is because I feel like it's too dramatic of a change from where the off-leash areas are today without the problems being different than we talked about with our 6 months of community surveys and interactions when we did the Purgatory Master Plan. I'm okay. I worry that that the motion so far reduced the off-leash area too much. I'm also concerned that maybe it's too dramatically reduced on the proposal too. However, I'm okay if it's less than what it is today because I do want to protect folks on the primary trail. I'm a dog lover, but with a dog that cannot interact with off-leash dogs. It's trouble. So I get that fear of when an off-leash dog runs across the primary trail. And people having bad interactions or dogs having bad interactions. So I'm okay if it's a little smaller, but not as dramatic as the motion so far. So my proposal would be to take the current staff recommendation, expand Area 1 or Area 2 by like 50%, something closer to something a little more than this dramatic reduction here in the recommendation. And I don't know whether that 50% more should be in Area 1 or Area 2, because I spend most of my time on the primary trails in this park.
Or what about the northeast corner?
Yes, I'm very intrigued by that northeast corner. Very intrigued.
Is that specific enough?
Should I
motion?
change? Should I be more specific? Do you want me to tweak it to your addition? So,
I'm more interested
yes,
to make
please.
sure they have a motion that they can,
Yes, as specific as you can be
specific.
is the most helpful.
I don't know where the energy is in the board. Okay, I'll take Ann's energy and say, can we take the staff recommendation as is and add on the northeast corner, area A,
no comments, please.
And just to
to
be clear,
broaden the off-leash areas available for
that's
dogs?
including Area 1 and Area 2, as shown?
Yes.
As shown or expanded?
As shown.
As shown, I'm trying to partner and tweak. I'm curious where the energy is in the room. I would be open to either expanding Area 1 and Area 2 a bit or adding a northeast corner. Curious what the room thinks.
I personally don't want to see Area 1 go any further into the prairie. I am less concerned about Area 2.
I'm concerned. I like the northeast corner at some point potentially, because I think it's an interesting area and it's very adjacent to the parking lot. But for the purposes of what we're discussing today, I think that it's critical that Area 2 be substantially larger than it is now. That's my 2 cents. And I know there's been discussion around a comprehensive dog plan and dog development, but if you go back through the discussion and the meetings and the input we received for the Purgatory Master Plan, there's an awful lot of it that took place at that time. We haven't really talked about it in other parts, which I think is one of the benefits of the working group. I think that the working group, we had some good discussion about other potential future areas. But I think we have a pretty good understanding of the history and usage in Purgatory Park.
Can you summarize your ideas in a motion?
Well, my motion, but I don't know, are you a motion on the floor? I'm trying to be Robert's
I'm not
rules.
sure we have
I'm still
specific
working.
I don't think
Options.
There was an inkling of a
didn't
motion.
get a second.
Huh?
Yours didn't get a second.
I haven't made a
He hasn't made
motion.
motion yet.
Oh, I thought you had.
No,
All right.
I stated my opinion when we got to the discussion part, but I can make a motion and we can decide or not decide.
I think one discussion would be, could we do an interim? And I know we don't want to postpone it. I just feel rushed. And it may be because this is my second park board meeting. And I like the comprehensive dog policy. I feel like we're being very reactive. And we have very strong special interest groups. And my concern is that we're not following the master plan as part of it. And so I would be supportive of an interim so that the public can use off-leash areas as an interim, but not the permanent designation. And I know people want to have an answer, and I know they want to have a direction, but that we're under a time frame.
Sure.
And that's why I'm putting on their proposal for an interim, and then further discussion and consideration of that northeast, which sounds like we've got some momentum towards.
Can you put 45 back up? Since that was a discussion item, right? Yeah. So I'll take a crack at a motion. And consistent with your thought, Jennifer, about interim or kind of further development, if you will. The master plan as mapped here was, at least my recollection of how we worked it was, this was a today plan. In other words, implement today, and it would be effective at least 1 to 3 years. And then there could be longer term recommendations, as it says, 5 years and out. I could make a motion, or I would view this as, to some extent, satisfying that, because clearly we can always make change. I would propose that, I would move, I guess I'm making a motion, motion that we adopt the recommendation that was approved in the Purgatory Master Plan as shown on this slide, page 45 of the Purgatory Master Plan concept. You know, well, I guess I should just try to keep it simple. I would just propose we, you know, send forward the master plan as approved here as our recommendation, as outlined here, is for the next several years. And over time, you know, we can potentially, because it's going to take time, if we want to do something in the northwest corner or the northeast corner, that's going to take time. And every day there's people in Purgatory using the park and enjoying the park with their dogs. And I think this is the most effective way to do that. So that was pretty verbose. My motion would be that we adopt the master plan as laid out on this page, so to speak.
If I could just ask for a clarification, Chair Graham. So when you say the master plan, you mean that the areas in red are designated, are areas where dogs would have to be on a leash?
Yes.
And everything else, they could be off a leash?
Yes.
And it would...
With the one exception that for right now, you know, we show the, I'll call it the Red Barn area, the northeast corner, as available for off-leash. It's very little used. If we wanted to eliminate that for now from off-leash usage, while that's being considered and developed, that's fine. The northwest corner is being utilized today by people off-leash with dogs. It's you know, it limited to like basically 2 little single-track trails, maybe 3, because it's so dense in there. But so I wouldn't take that away. It's not used very much. But the key components here are the far right of this graphic, which is the area over the ridge. Well, I guess I would say one thing, which is the one modification I would, if it doesn't complicate things, is this shows, I'll call it the north side of the ridge being off leash. You follow me? In other words, from the primary trail to the top of the hill being off leash. I would be willing to have that move into the salmon color of being not off leash. It's not a lot of space, but if that's a really important area we spent a lot of time cutting down buckthorn in there. It's really not used by people meandering around other than to shortcut up the main trail to the top of the hill. I'd be willing to have that be, you know, not available, so to speak.
Can I make some observations at this point before we, or does it need
Sure.
to have a second?
Sure.
Okay, so it says in the lower of this map on page 45, in the short-term recommendation 1 to 3 years, number 4 says enhanced signage related to dogs in the park, including new entry signage with stronger language related to leash requirements, and off-leash dog boundary signage at locations proposed to allow off-leash dog activity. I just don't remember that this was the proposal for where off-leash dogs were going to be. Was I not at the right meeting, or does anybody else have the same problem I'm having who was at those meetings? Corey thinks it happens the way Dave said.
The way I read this short-term recommendation is the way I remember us discussing it. Yeah.
I guess the only other thing I'd throw into my motion is that we adopt this, but with the clear statement that we need to have hard barrier fencing along that primary trail on the east side of the park, you know, which is the top of this graphic, because that's the area where the most interactions take place. The dogs are closest to them, heavily used, non-treed, off-leash area. And it also has a Nantucket neighborhood adjacent to that too, which is actually even more at risk now because we've really done a great job of clearing all the buckthorn between the main trail and their backyards. So, you know, people now have to close their blinds when they're in their bathrooms.
I remember some very select fencing being part of that 1 to 3
Yeah,
year
yeah,
program. I don't see it in the text at this moment.
yeah.
If I recall that. I will second your motion.
No comments, please. No comments, please. So we have a motion and a second.
So Chair, just to make
Yes.
sure I'm clear, and if you could make sure you speak more directly in your microphone, I just want to make sure everybody can hear.
Okay, sorry.
Our IT staff said they're having a little trouble
Yeah,
picking
I have a
things up.
bad cramp. That's why I'm wiggling around up here.
So your motion is to basically adopt what's shown in the Purgatory Park Master Plan. The red areas would be on-leash areas. Everything else would be off-leash, including some type of hard barrier along the east side by the main trail. Did that
Yes,
capture it?
that's probably the easiest way to do it, yes.
Okay.
I also heard, though, that from the
The ridge thing?
ridge, from the loop trail on the north side of the trail up to the top of the ridge.
Yeah,
would be
I'm okay
closed.
with that too. I don't know if that makes the motion more cloudy,
I
but
th-
yeah.
Let's be
Yeah.
as specific as
Okay.
we can. And then I also heard you say that the Red Barn area could be marked as open,
Available, you mean?
available.
Well, I was actually saying, the green area up there, which is now available and no one uses, if it helps people out, we could make that salmon or red. I can go either way. No one uses that today. And then that way, by that I mean for this purpose, it could be future developed.
But for now, keep it unused.
Yeah.
Okay,
Does that make,
just so
does that
I'm
help?
clear. All right.
I don't think very many people go up there with their
No, I
dogs
don't think
today.
I think it's unused.
Yeah,
So just so I'm clear,
yes.
on the south side along the main trail, you want to have the ridge line be red, where dogs have to be on a leash or off?
The slope that goes down to the main trail could become red.
Okay.
I would maintain, which doesn't show up very well here, I would maintain, so the access to that area would be from the paved trail entering on the main ridge trail. And I would also maintain at the very, it's hard because this is not north-south, but at the bottom corner here, the west side, when you're coming down the main trail on the west side, right when it starts to bend along the ridge, there's a trail that goes up to the top of the ridge, up to where that bench is. I would keep that as off-leash so that people can enter off the top, go along the main tail, and then drop down to the primary trail and leash back up. If that makes, Matt, you know where I mean? Yeah. But there's maybe 4 other trails that go up to the top of the ridge, and I would designate those now off limits if we're going to close the slope off.
And then the northeast corner is off leash as well. Is that what I heard?
Sure. I might as well not change the map. I mean, just for the
Just want to
purposes.
make sure we're clear.
Yeah.
And so my understanding is there's a motion on the table and a second. I want to make sure.
And part of the rationale for that is this is a plan that was heavily public input on, that we spent a lot of time reviewing, and Matt spent a lot of time modifying. So it's kind of a tried and true, proven plan. It hasn't been executed. Well, it is executed today because people use it that way. But I think rather than, at this point, trying to figure something else out, this has sort of already been approved. Let's send it forward for consideration to be maintained in that status.
It was approved by us and the city council.
Well, they
About
didn't
a
have
year
to
ago,
approve
right?
last time. I don't think they had to approve the master plan, did they? They did.
They did.
Okay.
Yeah, they did.
Great.
So
So they-
not to muddy the waters,
Sure.
but the motion, is your motion also related to the entire guidance document that staff is proposing?
Oh,
Is it just changing the map and the park?
you mean in other words, beyond that, beyond purgatory?
Right.
Well, okay, this is the purgatory component of my motion. My other part, if I can throw it out there, is I would move also that the city take strong consideration for some of the other items that were identified, particularly the Minnetonka Mills, I'll call it the Minnetonka Mills Big Willow corridor. And since that's being master planned in 2025, I'm comfortable with that timeline. Another area that was talked about was the kind of unique one, which is Civic Center, Mooney. That's not being master planned for a long time. And if we're interested in pursuing other large areas like that, I don't think we should be waiting for 2028 to do that.
Thank you, Chair. If I could actually step back, we probably should have two motions here.
Okay,
So the first motion is related to Purgatory Park in particular.
that's a good idea.
And so my understanding is there's a motion and a second on the table.
Yes, so
Correct?
then you can, if there's no discussion, oh, yes.
I would just like to remind you that one of the criteria that the community working group came up with was that high-quality areas should not be designated as off-leash, which are these green areas, and there's a lot of green in this part that we're...
Yep.
So what are you saying that because this is only temporary,
I'm saying because,
this isn't destroying the thing we all agreed on?
I think, having participated in the working group, I think we spent more time actually agreeing on definitive things in the Purgatory Master Plan than in the working group. The working group, to my recollection and impression, was more not as definitive about what we want to do. Not that we don't want to protect valuable areas, but we didn't stress test it with, well, if this is a high quality area, what steps are we willing to take? It wasn't, to me, a black and white kind of situation. And a lot of the voting was sort of on your cell phone. Some of it was on your smartphone. Can you respond back? And we tally scores. And we never necessarily talked after tallying the scores, not minimizing the importance of natural spaces.
If I could jump into looking at the master plan, it does show short-term and long-term, which is where I'm like us to go. And so again, because of the urgency and the time and the previous consensus in the master plan, but I don't think it would preclude the future of the designated off-leash in the northeast, northwest in there. So I guess that's why I'm supportive of it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
when we wrote the plan, I remember if the 1 to 3 year short-term plan didn't work and we needed to get, the problems continued, and then we needed to get more serious and about a true park. That's why I recall we set that long-term plan.
So is motion one clear enough for you guys?
It is.
Okay, so then we vote?
We can take a vote. Are you ready for
Yeah,
that?
I have more comments.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I
Yes,
think
Cory.
so this is very curious to me that we have two park board members who are on this community group. The two park board members who were on it are the most seasoned on the board, and yet effectively I'm hearing from those members, and I'm not hearing from the community group, work group members, because there's no comment from them tonight. Why a completely new plan was the product of that work group. And the amendment by the chair is effectively, we didn't need to do any of that work because we have a Purgatory Park Master Plan here that effectively is status quo, with the exception of these pink lines, okay? The second question is, how are informal trails, my impression is in the Purgatory Master Plan, informal trails are not for people without dogs.
That's not correct.
If it's off-leash dog space,
That's not correct. In fact, we've had comments from people who hike in the south side, if you will, the Area 2 or whatever we called Area 2, who are expressing concern. They hike there today without dogs, in the presence of dogs. And they're concerned that if we make it a dog park, they won't be able to hike there and bird there because it's a dog park and it's going to be enclosed. So there are people who hike there today, go birding there today, along with dogs. And at least for the people that commented and sent notes in, they didn't have an issue with being in the presence of off-leash dogs. So this is a clarification.
so, I have heard from folks in the community who, and this is kind of, in my impression, the impetus for all of this from the city council to us, is that there are people not willing to visit parks in Minnetonka
Yes.
because there are dogs off leash.
Yes.
There are dogs off leash even on ordinance mandated locations with some frequency and consistency, which obviously begs the question if the ordinance is really present in the city in many respects. So I question whether the idea that folks who have that concern, and if that was an impetus for this entire work, how we are unwilling to talk about a constituency of residents who do effectively feel that apart from the pink areas, they cannot go. They are unwilling to go because they do not want to deal with an off-leash dog. They don't want to deal with an off-leash dog's human owner. Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
If I can-
we have to
yeah.
we have to address that group of folks, which, in my opinion, or my understanding, is a strong impetus for this entire discussion. Yes, we've got dog owners who are concerned about their dogs in their behavior on or off leash around other dogs on or off leash, but we also have a constituency that does not want to be around off-leash dogs or dogs that aren't under control. And then you effectively say to those members of our community, these areas really aren't for you then. And we're fine with that? Is that what we're saying as a city? And I'm not sure the impetus for this whole work, that the answer is, yes, we're fine with that. I think the answer is, boy, we really need to think about this more and find a way for this space to be more perhaps available.
Welcoming, perhaps. I think my thought is that the new ordinance is addressing it and what I noticed in this park was that there was a lot of off-leash on the other trails, or the main trails,
primary
the
trails.
primary trails. And so by having the leash, that gives the city staff the ability to cite people who have their dogs off-leash on the primary trails. And so we're looking today at opportunities for people to be off-leash on the non-main trails. Sorry, I can't get that name
Well, the
straight.
main
It's-
trails were already ordinanced to be on leash.
Okay,
That's what staff told us at the beginning of this discussion.
But
That's
un-
been part of
unenforced.
part of maintained trail
the
ordinance.
to your point, Caleb, the impetus for this master plan, not even just the off-leash dog group, was exactly your concern. Feedback from people who don't feel comfortable in the park, and people that have been confronted on the primary trails, whether they're kids with strollers or people with dogs on leash. The issues that have appeared have not the only have been on those primary trails. And the purpose of this, and that's why there's the buffer, if you look at this map, there's the buffer intended to kind of help keep people back from the main trail. And that's why, as Katie and I were talking about, it's critical to have fencing along that eastern trail, which is the top of this graphic, because the trail is so close to the off-leash dog area where people use it. The only
I get that, but that's kind of speaking to my point, which is my supposition is that if what you've effectively got are go, no-go zones for humans who do not want to be encountering off-leash dogs, effectively making non-pink areas for that group of residents or visitors to these parks the only places they can be. And yet there are numerous informal trails that provide another level of adventure for children, adults, toddlers, whoever, to explore. But because of feedback that led to all of this, people feel those are actually, those constituents, those visitors feel effectively like, nope, that's actually not for me. And the current ordinance at the time of this work agreed with them. This is not for me.
I'm sorry, explain that last comment.
Well, so prior to the Purgatory Creek Master Plan, there was some concern about whether dogs had to be leashed on the paved trail surfaces, right? Although I'm still, my understanding is still that was actually on the books. That's not new.
It was not, you couldn't tell, but it was on the books.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
signage was unclear, and the signage was later changed to try and make it more clear.
Sure. So
And even with that, you have bad actors.
yeah,
Their dogs on leash.
almost universal. So the places that are not in pink, okay, on this master plan, are the only places some people feel like they can be. Okay? And I don't think that's a small group. And in fact, I think that's the group that led to all this work.
I can tell you with a high degree of, at least from every letter I've read and the feedback we received, with I can think of the only comments we've had in the non-pink areas from non-dog walkers, non-dog people, are potentially a few instances of people working in restoration and being harassed by dogs off leash. And that's not, and that's an important thing, and that's, I think, one of the things that the community group at Paws for Parks is trying to get better understanding of that. But I have not received, in all the time I've been on the park board, and maybe Matt or you've got other input, I don't think we've ever received feedback from someone who said, I was, in the woods and was uncomfortable because there were dogs there. The issues always come up with people on the primary trail with a logical expectation that they can walk their child in a stroller or they can bike through there and not be at risk with dogs. And that was why this plan was trying very hard to create soft barriers in the sense of distancing, as well as proposed fencing in certain areas where, and again, not enclosing entire areas, but areas where the proximity of off-leash dogs and the primary trails exist really needed to have more protection, so to speak.
Well, if you have informal trails that are accessible to people who don't want to be with or in proximity to off-leash dogs, then there's really no way to have a soft barrier, because that individual could go onto a informal trail that is available, is clearly pre-made or footwork made, and because of soft barriers, which would probably be based on primary trails, they effectively
For
can't
protecting primary trails.
use the informal trails because the informal trail would lead them into an off-leash area.
Right, yeah, let me try this. If you're asking, should a person without a dog walking in an off-leash designated area expect to find off-leash dogs?
Well, I'm saying, does a soft barrier, how do you measure a soft barrier when somebody's able to access an informal trail? So, because you're basing, and aren't you basing a soft barrier on primary trails?
Yeah, Matt, isn't that your,
So we do note that soft barriers could be accomplished with signage. So perhaps there's an intersection between a primary trail and an informal trail, and there could be a sign saying, once you leave this trail, this area is now considered designated. Perhaps there's a little map, and then when you get to the other edge of that designated area, even if it's all informal trails, there would be another sign saying you're leaving this area. That's the way I imagined it, at least.
Caleb, I hear what you're saying, and I think I agree that the only area that is safe for a person who's afraid of dogs or has a reactive dog on a leash are the pink areas. So essentially, the
And that
edge
there's
of,
very few informal trails for those people to enjoy.
exactly.
Yep.
So
That's
the
probably-
park has become a few trails. It's not the whole 155 acres anymore. It's for people who have, for one reason or another, an issue with dogs. It's just the pink, which I personally think is not fair.
Yeah, thanks for that feedback and the clarification as we discuss and learn together. I want to, I'm trying to work through it with everybody, and so I've already heard people say, like, especially my fellow new member Jennifer, like, and Brad, you're probably maybe thinking the same. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I sit here before you today having had no ability to determine the timeline of this meeting relative to the city council meeting, relative to when the ordinance was passed, relative to when we're supposed to potentially, for the sake of the community, have at least some place for an off-leash dog to enjoy life. So I remain concerned about the sense of time crunch. However, I return to the impetus of this whole work and the ability for large swaths of parks to be able to be enjoyed by even more members of the community, and the greatest concerned group that led to all this work were the exact people I'm talking about, who felt that they were only able to enjoy Purgatory Park and other places if they were on a primary trail. And even then, they frequently expressed experiences of encountering off-leash dogs on those primary trails. And so it paints a picture that's not pretty for ordinance enforcement. It paints a picture where a first-time visitor to Purgatory Park, or perhaps a second-time visitor to Purgatory Park, learns, I can't go on the informal trails because all I see is off-leash dogs. And I don't want to be around off-leash dogs because X, Y, or Z reason, inclusive of your own pet issue, your issue, your child's issue, something. And so to me, that doesn't solve the problem, the master plan, and nor does soft barriers in the context of these informal trails, because I think the soft barrier, especially if we're talking about distance, moves if you can actually access, if someone feels as though they can actually access the informal trail. So aesthetically and lots of other potential reasons, I guess I'm concerned about not having hard barriers. And you mentioned on Area 2 that there was concerns about birders, hikers, who are fine to encounter off-leash dogs. And I hear that, and I can, as a birder, I can totally get that. On the other hand, I wonder, why, is there a way that people would then, because it's an enclosed hard space, or that people feel, well, at least I have a perimeter, a safe perimeter to hike around. And I'm still accessing these areas, but in a safer perimeter. So a lot of this is me talking out loud, as you all can hear.
There's clearly been issues along the primary trails. In the 6 years, I think it's 6 years, 5 years on the park board, I've personally yet to see or review a letter or a communication from a resident that they were troubled experiencing an off-leash dog in the off-leash area, particularly, well, in any of the off-leash areas. I have to say, I don't recall. I remember one relating to an unfortunate experience where a restoration person was was bitten. But Caleb, I appreciate your concern for people being able to use the park, but I think you're trying to solve for an issue that hasn't happened in the informal trails. At least no one's commented on, geez, I really don't feel comfortable in the informal trails because there's off-leash dogs there. On the primary trails, absolutely. And again, it's not a massive number, but it happens, and you should not feel unwelcome or unsafe going through the park on those trails. And that's why the pink areas are important for buffers, and in several areas it's critical to have some form of barrier. And I guess I want to clarify again, my personal intention would be in the area, the ridge area, the woods, that we don't have enclosures other than I'll call them demarcation, clear demarcation areas, more than just a sign that says leash up. It's sort of like a little gate you walk through that's open gate, but just says, hey, please, you're supposed to be leashed between here and that next gate you see right across the primary trail. Because you want that to be an open experience of just, looping around, walking around in the park. You don't want to have it feel like you're enclosed with dogs in a dog park.
Can I make a recommendation that we vote on the
Yeah, so we
motion?
have a-
And if it doesn't pass, maybe you have a tweak in mind, based on your.
So we have a
feedback.
motion and a second on proposal one, or motion one, or whatever it would be, which would be do you want to state it again? Because that way you'll be able to execute it.
So my understanding is it would be the Purgatory Park Master Plan with the red areas that are shown as on leash would be on leash. That's what would be required. And then everything else would be off leash, considered off leash.
If we want to do that the slope.
And taking the red area on that south end and going up to the ridge line, protecting that slope and that ridge line.
Yeah.
Yes. And I'll ask Mr. Kumka, is that clear enough for you?
Ms. Yetke, yes, it is.
So we had a motion and a second, I think, right? We're good to go for a vote?
All right. So, Christie.
Huh?
There was a fence on the east end.
Oh, fence on these, just your,
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Yes.
That's the primary, yeah.
yes.
Good, thank you. It was part of it. Not supposed to talk, though. But that was good.
Okay. Christie.
Yes.
Hanley.
No.
Lehrman.
Yes.
Schultz.
No.
Samarsky.
Yes.
Vitale.
Yes.
Chair Ingraham.
Yes.
Motion carries.
So now, no clapping. So now you want to move to motion 2 regarding the future parks, basically?
Correct. So we do have this guidance document that is being proposed tonight and to the council. And so we recognize the change in the plan for Purgatory Park specifically, but we would like to know if there are there's a motion to recommend approval of the rest of the document in essence, including the longer-term implementation piece.
I have a comment about that. I would like to suggest that that there may be parks for which we can use the Natural Resources Master Plan in lieu of a park-specific master plan so that we can speed things up.
Okay.
Although it doesn't cover every park that was proposed to have some dog off-leash space.
I would second that if that's a motion or modified.
Sure. I was started out being a discussion, but I'd be happy to make that a motion.
So if I could seek clarification on the motion, is the motion to recommend approval of the Minnetonka off-leash strategy, I'm forgetting the title, off-leash dog citywide strategy and guidance document to include use of the Natural Resources Master Plan
In lieu of a park-specific master plan so that we don't have to wait until 2028 for some of the parks. And I did not intend to say I would approve the whole thing. I was saying that that was a change to the existing plan. There may be other things people want to change.
I think we're in discussion mode. I think that what's hard for me on the future parks is understanding what the appetite for the city might be for how many parks and how much they want to do. So to me, it's a little hard. I mean, kind of like Ann is, I don't think I certainly never would have envisioned we would have all those areas to be developed for dogs, and I'm not sure that the residents feel a need for that. I guess I would agree with Ann's approach, but maybe word it that we're supportive of the future parks that are discussed, but would not wait for master plan to be a trigger for when those are developed and to utilize the natural resources plan to aid that. I don't know if we want to be specific on, I mean, Ann, you and I were the only ones on the working group, but I think if we should be, throwing some support behind a specific area or leave that to the city to do that, city council to do that.
I think it's the park board's deal. Shouldn't it be? I think it should be the park board's
I do too. I'm trying to think how that
recommend.
motion works then. Maybe that the
Next meeting.
maybe that staff, how about this? And this isn't a motion yet. Maybe we can make it one if it helps, but that staff we're supportive of the future outline from the working group, and that staff would be directed to bring to the park board future opportunities accelerated ahead of any master plan if that becomes a barrier for a park. Like Minnetonka Mills area is already in 2025, which is this year. So that one's probably okay to do both ways, resource plan and the master plan. But if you were looking at, say, Civic Center or some other park, if staff feels that that's a really attractive area, that they could use that to move ahead. So I guess the motion
Maybe
is,
staff could bring top 3 options across the park system, thinking geographically and thinking about the criteria.
because geography matters for getting it spread through the city.
I guess I wonder why we wouldn't want to do this under the master planning timeline for each park, because the goal is for this to be well done, well thought off, well planned, well financed. And if we're not taking the time to master plan the park to be inclusive of off-leash areas, then how do we know that the off-leash area we've designated in some more rapid manner doesn't just get reworked, torn down, etc., expanded, contracted, whatever the case may be, if we're not doing a full master plan effort? So I oppose trying to bypass that. I think we should go through the process that's been in place, that we tackle these areas. The only an alternative, and again, I know we're talking about a motion, but if we do think, as a park board and/or by staff, from a geographical standpoint, that we need an off-leash area somewhere else in the metro or in the city, then do we change that park's time to be master planned?
Okay.
Right. We reorder this. We add something. We bump something.
Sure.
Or we take on 2 in a year, something to that effect.
If I could just remind Chair and Graham and Park Board members, the master plan process right now is laid out in the capital improvement plan, which the city, we update every year. And so in June, at your June meeting, that capital improvement plan will be coming back to the Park Board for 2026. In 2025, it already allocates funds to master plan Big Willow, but everything else, that is something that the Park Board will see in June again.
So they could do it then.
You could do it in
We could
June.
reprioritize
You
it.
could reprioritize it.
My concern is Purgatory is by far the heaviest used and most passionate and the strongest sense of large community. But there are other parks, I think of particularly Jadana and some other parks that are used actively by off-leash dog owners that are now, will be not available. And so in my mind, looking at the list on the slide that's in front of us, I mean, personally, I think Lone Lake is a stretch because there's not any space left. So that's really not going to happen. Civic Center Park is an interesting one that came up in the working group. It has large parking. There are no neighbors. It's a kind of different space, but if that master plan was done earlier than 2027, that would be, I think, a good one to look at along with the Big Willow. The list.
And they're both north. Purgatory's covers
Yes.
kind of the
Yeah.
southern zone,
Yep.
so
Yep.
something in the
Right.
north.
Central
zone.
or north.
Yep.
Also, but how were these parks and dates determined?
That's a good question. So they've been on the books for a while, since the post plan was developed. And so when the post plan was adopted, it laid out a priority of master planning our community parks. We have 5 community parks. In terms of the order, I'm not sure there was a specific reason why this order was chosen. Purgatory Park is definitely our largest one. And so we started there first, and I see maybe Matt.
To some
Oh, yeah?
degree, we've divided them up by the biggest efforts and try to space out the big, more complicated ones and intermingle the smaller ones in between. So staff sort of rearranged them based on effort, essentially.
There's a significant cost because they're mostly done by outside consultants.
Of the master plans.
The master plans,
Yeah.
yes.
And a lot of community engagement.
Yeah, a lot of community.
True,
adds up.
yeah.
And just to add, the priority or the list and the way it was developed, it was not, dogs and off-leash dogs were not
Part of
taken
it.
into consideration at that time.
And so what you were,
Right,
what you were recommending was that until we have a master plan, that we leverage the natural resource plans, to make sure I understood you accurately?
Right, so since the city purchased that land along Minnetonka Boulevard, between Minnetonka Boulevard and the creek, just west of Big Willow Park, that's a logical place to think about where another off-leash area might be. And Big Willow is going to be master planned this year, so that kind of takes care of that. And I would agree, unless we convert some of the mountain bike trails to a dog area,
There's no space.
there's no other space.
Yeah. I thought there might have been space where, what do you call your spot, Darren, when you park the picnic tables? The nursery, yeah, I thought the nursery might be possible, but then I didn't realize we didn't own the property just to the north of it. There's a big square there that's private, so I don't think, unless we want to convert a soccer field, which we don't, I think that Lone Lake is not really a viable option. So, but if we can, to Kayla's point, if we can wait to June, if we can flip in June Civic Center with, say, Lone Lake, unless that creates some other problem, that would, tee up another interesting area to review. So what's our motion here?
Before you make that, just another clarification, especially for our new park board members. Whenever there's a change in use proposed for any park, that does come before the park board. So when we talk about master planning, it's primarily our large parks. If there is a need for some type of off-leash designation in a smaller park or a neighborhood park or some area that's not in our master planning schedule, that still comes before the park board. So I just want to make sure that the park board understands any change in use will come before the park board, so you will see those as well.
And for the ones who are in the working group, I think the way that I would view those, the way I think those are best described, that was the second group that Matt talked about. And it's sort of like you can picture that as a truly enclosed small space that's more like an exercise area for your dogs, not hiking trails and things like that.
I think I was supportive because I do value, and I think Minnetonka is known for its natural resources. And so that's why I wanted to support and go with that as an interim until we do the master planning. I think that shows that we value the natural resources where some may not feel that that was the decision from today. And so that's why I wanted to support you.
So Chair, if I could, I think I'm hearing two different things. One is I'm hearing that we would follow the master planning process and recognize that the master planning is the time to decide when or where a dog off-leash area is. And the park board can revisit the schedule and the priorities of that master planning schedule during the June CIP discussion. What I'm also hearing is instead of following the CIP master planning schedule, we would change that and use the NRMP and plan off-leash designated areas based on the natural resources master plan potentially ahead of the CIP.
I guess my question is, what's our sense of urgency to decide that next dog park area, right? Have we reduced the off-leash area so much that citizens are going to be upset and want something else on the north side sooner than later?
It's not.
Or do we feel like we have a couple years to decide that next area?
I didn't see any reduction.
Okay.
Oh, no, within the park system, the
Yeah,
citywide park
see.
system, off-leash dogs have been allowed in
Yeah.
every single park across the whole system. So we're going to have areas of the city now
yeah,
where
you're right. I
off-leash,
withdraw.
our off-leash friends are going to be hungry for, well, what's my solution for my side of town?
And for clarification, appreciate, designated, mine was until the master planning, using the natural resource management plan as a basis until we get to the master planning. I'm not proposing to overrule that master planning process.
So just to be clear, I think what you're saying is that we would designate off-leash areas in a park, potentially, based on information in the natural resources master plan before, natural resources master plan, before the park master plan has been completed.
Until, in cases we don't have one.
Yeah, if needed, let's say. If
How about,
Matt's coming to us with 3 areas to consider for additional off-leash areas. If those don't all have a master plan, and they won't because the only one that has a master plan right now is Purgatory, I'm just trying to keep this all moving. I don't want to, I believe in the master planning process. I think we should have master plans. I'm just trying to find a way to keep as many people happy as possible without doing too much damage to the parks.
So I've lost a little bit of track of the potential
Yeah.
motion, so I want to make
Did you
sure
have
I'm
a
clear.
comment?
No, I'm on board with what you said.
Okay. How about,
Because I'm assuming we have a sense of urgency to get some more solutions to the community.
There's going to be pressure, and so without those directions and the timing that it takes, that we have a very good solid foundation, and that we need to make sure that we protect our natural resources based on our plans.
And the Natural Resources Master Plan has quite a bit of information in it about where the high quality areas are, which was one of our criteria. So I'm just trying to use information we already have, if we need to.
And I agree, I think we should be moving this forward. I don't think it's a 2-year project. I think it's an ongoing project. And we've been given good guiding principles at the very beginning of how to utilize the space. And I think we should think about that for other parks.
how about, if we don't have a firm motion on the floor, how about this, that a motion that the park board is very supportive of the, I'll call it the Minnetonka corridor, the Big Willow, Minnetonka, what do you call it, Minnetonka Mills, landing, no, we don't call it landing, it's, what is it? The park, the little place. Is it the landing?
Yes, it's called.
It is, oh, it is. I also think that's not where the dam is.
Minnehaha Landing.
Okay,
Mills
anyways, you know where I
Mills
mean.
Landing.
From the Dairy Queen going west towards Big Willow, that city property would be, where our motion would be to move with urgency to review and develop that as a off-leash park
A proposal for an off-leash park.
proposal. Well, I think, okay, well, it's going to get reviewed, so by definition, it's a proposal, yes. And that, we seek to use, it sounds like you seek to use the natural resources plan to also move forward with other parks that were identified in the working group. So, and not necessarily rely on the master plan date, but hopefully in June we could adjust some of those dates too, so they coincide. The best thing would be if they coincide. Is that a motionable motion?
Yeah, so what I hear is you would like staff to bring back a plan for, accelerated plan for 3 off-leash areas, one being Big Willow, which will be master plan this year, and revisit the master planning schedule if needed at that time with the CIP discussion.
If the staff could bring 3 options, maybe. We don't have to do all 3, but 3 potential options for the next off-leash dog area with rationale that's supported by the Natural Resource Plan and the criteria that was established by the working team within the next month or 2. If we put a timeline on it. Is that a clear motion?
Is that a good enough motion to get a second behind?
That is, I think that's clear enough.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion?
Yes, I have a question or a comment, I don't know. So we just had a vote and passed a off-leash map that was part of a master plan that, to everyone's knowledge, as it was raised and discussed, did not correlate with the natural resources maps for where best to have off-leash dogs. So effectively we said, meh, we don't care about that. What we care about is the master plan. So why do we want to, again, go off the process of historical reviews of major parks that that may result in us saying, yeah, we actually don't care about the natural resources mapping because it doesn't work as well with what we want to do with the master plan of this park. We're fine to intrude on level 1, natural resource area because it works better to have a dog off-leash space there. I'm not saying we're going to do that, but we did just do that to our largest park. So help me understand. Now, I'm not saying that's how I want to do this, that I want to take away those spaces, but the park board just did that. So help me understand why we shouldn't just use the master planning effort, which encompasses the entirety, the breadth of what we want that park to look like, to how we want it to be utilized for all sorts of reasons, especially with these large parks that have multiple visitors for multiple types of reasons. They're often very busy, thankfully, much of the year. So, because there may be instances where we're deviating from the natural resources map and maybe would even need to do that at a later point, therefore reworking an off-leash space at the cost to the city and the taxpayers that was unnecessary. And I'm not saying that all for the sake of expediency is not a good reason, because we are in a crunch for places for off-leash dogs to be. So I get that, but we're already saying we're going to do it for Big Willow. It's already scheduled. We want to do it right. We want to do that whole master plan right. If we in June move things around such that we're going to talk about Civic Center Park, let's say, instead of Lone Lake, because as you mentioned, it may not be a great off-leash discussion point. But let's say we move up Civic Center, and then we've got another reasonably central, Big Willows, maybe north central, however we want to talk about it. And in a year and a half, or really probably less than that, maybe a calendar year of time, we will have had the development of 3 new off-leash spaces at perhaps 3 of our biggest parks, depending on how we define that. So that's my concern. We clearly don't. We've already shown tonight that the natural resources map is not the be-all, end-all in our decision making, whereas the master planning is a more robust way to do full park planning, and I think we want to do it right the first time.
I don't think anyone's disagreeing with that. We're just saying that there's going to be more pressure before we can get to the master plan in 2 years from now. And so in lieu of having a master plan, or until we have a master plan, that we rely on the information from the natural resource plan, so it can be natural resource centric, making decision proactively, not in a reactive crisis that we were in today. At least that's my take of the situation we are in today.
Yeah, my hope is that Purgatory is the only park where we have heavily dog trampled areas in highly grade 1 natural resource areas. I don't expect us to see that again across the park system.
I am hoping that at some point these green areas of Purgatory are protected. That it's not
And they may
part
have,
of the-
and they may have, yeah.
Right.
that it's not part of the off-leash area.
And I would agree with that. This is an interim step based on the master planning. And the master planning had a short-term, I would call it medium, maybe it just said long-term. But that's why I feel like the citizens need a path forward today, which is why I voted in favor of it. And because of the robust public input, the multidisciplinary from natural resource to users was factored into the Purgatory. But when you look at that, the intent for long-term is to have a designated off-leash area, not in the natural resource area. But in the short term, it is. And so sometimes there has to be a give and take. until you get to the long-term. So you guys just heard my long-term strategy, but I'm okay with being transparent.
And I think Caleb, to your question and answers, the natural resource, looking at the natural resource plans as we look at these areas, a big difference is they're not today heavily used by off-leash dogs. And so you could kind of look at it and go, oops, actually this isn't a good area because it is it's high quality today. Let's take this off the table. Or, yeah, this is actually has a very workable space that's not high quality, and therefore, and whereas Purgatory was a very different situation based on many years of history and usage. So I think what I hear the message being by the park board is supportive of some more parks, some more areas, and a sense of urgency, not kind of necessarily looking at the master planning dates as laid out here. Although I think, Big Willow's great because it is this year. And if we were to decide to, make other changes, say for Civic Center Park, if after, the way I would look at it is looking at the National Resource Plan, if Civic Center Park is actually a pretty good option, then yeah, how can we make that happen on some more urgent timeline?
If I may, Chair, just to sort of clarify a little, what I'm hearing in the motion is giving staff direction to come up with a plan. It doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be what's implemented. It will be coming before the park board. You will be able to see it again and deliberate over it, and if you want to make changes, you certainly have that right. So I just want to make sure it's clear. The expectation on our end is that we're not coming with physical plans that are going to be implemented. It's a plan for a plan, basically.
And I think the only thing is to have it clear that I assume the park board feels a sense of urgency about this, given our residents' desire to be in nature with their dogs. So,
Yes.
so that people don't walk away or interpret tonight as, well, Purgatory's it and all the other places are gone. No, we are supportive of trying to move in a urgent but careful way to identify other areas.
Yes, thank you. So I think there's a motion on the table.
And did we get a second? I can't remember.
I
Second.
do not believe we did.
Second? Okay, yep. So we take a vote?
Sure. Christie,
Yes.
Hanley,
Yes.
Lehrman,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Samersky,
Yes.
Vitale,
Yes.
and Chair Ingraham.
Surprisingly, yes.
Thank you.
So I
Can
think
I-
that concludes.
No, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I have something else.
Yeah.
I feel very strongly that the Purgatory situation, where most of the park is open to off-leash dogs, should be communicated as a temporary thing, that it's not necessarily permanent in some way, because people don't like it when you take stuff away from them that they have now, as we have seen. If our intention is to, by creating more spaces in other parks, our intention is to shrink down the amount of space open to off-leash dogs at Purgatory, that we should tell people that in advance. Maybe not everybody agrees with me.
The word interim was bantered around in the conversation. It didn't make it, though, in the motion, did it? I'm asking for clarification, because we said the word multiple times, but
We did.
it didn't.
So I think we had a motion, a second, and a vote.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Do we need another motion to make it interim?
That's not what we voted on. I don't think we voted on an interim solution. We voted on the master plan, but I don't remember, unless the minutes reflect something different. I
Yeah.
don't think it was an interim solution. And if you're
Well, I'm
and if
glad
you're
I
now
voted
stating
against
that for interim, there'd be another 100 people still in the audience. That would be very unfair.
And just a reminder again, if there's a proposed change, that would come before the park board at that time for the park board to
Yeah.
deliberate.
I don't think what we voted on means it's in there in perpetuity. I think it means that that's what we're doing now. And as was discussed, if, the northeast or northwest options become attractive and people can get comfortable with some of those ideas, then there may be ways to take off pressure on the prairie area. And I would certainly be supportive of that, but that's something that hasn't happened yet, but could. So.
Then do
go
we
ahead.
need to ask staff to start making a plan to do work to make the northeast and potentially northwest quadrants dog friendly?
So Chair Ingram and park board members, I mean, if we're coming back with a plan, that can be a part of the plan. If there's an interest on the park board for that to be a part of the plan, that's certainly at the park board's purview.
Well, I'm not sure what the right protocol here is. I think as pertains to, we'll call them the northeast, northwest sections, what staff would have to bring back with is not make a plan, but they could come back with what are the, costs and ramifications of those two spaces, so then we can figure out if a plan's worth doing. I'm supportive of that. But, there's issues around the northwest side relative to the cost, as well as neighbors and parking, because there's a parking issue there, potentially. And in the northeast, there's the issue potentially around how we use the Red Barn and other things. So I would be okay with, and it's not just up to me, but I would be okay with, staff coming back to us with, I guess would that to be a motion? Do we have to do a motion for that?
I don't think, no, you don't need a motion.
Okay. But I think that'd be good.
Doesn't the map's not up anymore for the Purgatory Creek, but that showed the proposed off-leash dog space?
Yes, it did. The northwest
Yeah.
piece. Yeah.
And that's the 5+.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
So based on what we're sending to the city council, that portion of what we sent, if they approve it, then it seems to me that's the designated off-leash area.
The long-term 5.
Yeah, well, I mean, whenever they want to do it, it could be now,
Well,
it could be.
There would be, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ann, I'm sorry. Well, I was going to say is, and I'm not trying to be semantic or split hairs. The language there, if it's determined that an off-leash dog park is warranted in the community, and I view an off-leash dog park as different than an off-leash dog area personally, because it's very different requirements and expectations of how it works. So that didn't necessarily preclude the continued use of the off-leash area in the ridge line and in the center. But that's something that, we don't have to decide tonight.
Could we get a cost estimate from staff?
I think that's what we were just talking
Okay,
about.
that's where I was
getting that
trying to
for
get
the
back to
northeast
that
and
topic.
northwest.
We could get a cost
Yes, we can
estimate.
take a look at that.
And we've already received letters from the residents next to that space, as you would expect. So, anything else around business item 7A? If not, we can go to information items. And are you comfortable with what you got? You got what you needed for 7A?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening, Chair. We just have one information item tonight, and that is that we held the Spring Extravaganza a couple Saturdays ago on Saturday, April 5th. We had almost 150 kids here at the community center. We had an egg hunt. They had some entertainment. It was a great time. There were some pictures attached that are now up on the screen. So that's one of our special events that we hold each year. Again, had about 150 kids. It was a great event. Thank you.
Looks like fun.
I thought that's what this board, park board was about. I was misled.
Yeah. fun things.
Why is it not going back? I need to.
Are we on to upcoming meeting schedule?
Upcoming, something a little more easy, upcoming schedule, which I'm having trouble getting on the computer. So just to remind everybody, because this is a special session, we have officially canceled the May meeting, so we will not be meeting in May. And we do have a June meeting on June 4th, and we have quite a full agenda. We have this capital improvement plan will be coming before the park board before it goes on to the city council. We have a draft Cullen Nature Preserve master plan, so that's another master plan that we've been working on. We have some park habitat restoration and maintenance plans for specific parks, including Big Willow, Jadana, and Green Circle Park. And so these plans are specifically related to habitat restoration activities. And then we have an update on the Covington and Oberlin Park tennis and pickleball question. Those are being resurfaced, and so we asked the neighbors if they want to have pickleball, and so you'll hear the results of that information. I did include the rest of the meetings for this year. In September, we'll have a joint park board and city council meeting, and then park board member Hanley did point out that the October meeting is on the 22nd, which is not your typical meeting date, and that is because of Yom Kippur. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. O'Day regarding other activities. I do, before that, want to point out that there is a boards and commissions recognition dinner. We invite all of you to attend. Hopefully you did receive an invitation from the city, and so I encourage you to attend. It's a fun evening. Usually there's a speaker, and there's a dinner, and you get to meet and socialize with some fellow commissioners.
Thank you, Leslie. As she mentioned, the upcoming schedule, boards and commissions dinner listed. Farmers Market this year will be over at the Marsh parking lot. So that'll be Tuesdays starting June 3rd. Shady Oak Beach opens Saturday the 7th. Our Music in the Park series begins at the end of June. And then we do have Summerfest listed, which is always the 4th Saturday in June. This year it's the 28th. So Saturday the 28th, Summer Festival here at the Civic Center campus.
What time does the farmers market start? Just thinking about the parking over there, it's been so good.
Parking has been busy there weekday mornings at the Marsh, yes, but we start in the early afternoon. I believe it's 2 to 6 for the farmers market, which typically parking winds down by then.
Any other comments on this? Otherwise, we could go to park board member reports. Anybody have something they want to report? Okay, I think we've done a lot of reporting tonight as it was. The critical next motion, any motions around item number 10?
I'll motion to adjourn.
Have a second?
I'll second.
Great.
All in favor?
Want to thank the people that came tonight. Oops.
We do need a vote. We don't
Will
need
you
to
actually
do roll
still
call?
vote on those?
No, we don't need a roll call. We just need a vote. I don't
Okay,
know if
well-
I heard a vote. All in favor?
Aye. Okay.
Thank
And
you.
thank you for those of you who've come tonight, and also to the park board members for a good discussion on a critical issue.